Welcome, everybody, to the experience. And it's been a little while. So it's going to be a really fun time today because Kate White, who is the genuine mystic, you can find her on all her social media, who is going to talk about her interpretation of what's going on in the world, is here with us. She's been on the show. I love her. Welcome, Kate.
Hey, thanks, Nora.
Yeah. So we're just starting at like we've had no conversation really except just the initial introduction. I really like to do shows that way because I've just found over time that so much juice is in that very sort of initial connection. And when you talk it through and sort of plan like what you want the interview to be about, then you get to the interview and it's like so let's just be where we
I
are.
agree. It's okay. I'm in space. I don't know about you.
I know. I mean, and you don't even need a spacesuit, which is pretty damn awesome.
I mean, I'm a mystic, so what can I say?
So the reason I have you on the show is because I really like what you have to say in the world and I like what you're doing. And I think it's important to have perspectives out there that are not run of the mill. Like, let's have some fresh perspectives on what's going on out there. I see a lot of fear. I see a lot of stress about and catastrophic thinking about what's going on. And, I think from a spiritual point of view, from a mystical point of view, we can talk about what you see going on and just your take on things.
Yeah, sure. I mean, astrology is one piece of it. I love it because it's analytical. It's a study of cycles, so you can look back to the last time, this pattern showed up. Um, Obviously, we don't live in a vacuum, really, so you can't isolate one pattern and assume it's going to be the same every time because there's other stuff going on too. And it gives the language to describing really complex configurations of energy, external and internal. So you
Mm-hmm.
could read on the general collective and trends, whether,
Mm-hmm.
that's coming up, but also your place within that. And so I think, especially in chaotic times, I find it, it's dangerous to attach too heavily to anything, whether it's a tarot reading or astrology reading or, whatever
Yo, sure,
interpretation.
sure.
Um, but I find it helpful, as orientation. If you're hiking on a trail and you see a map,
Mhm.
there's whether you
Yeah,
follow it or not, there's something comforting in seeing a route, a potential
yeah,
route to take.
sure. Do
I'm
you
curious.
go ahead? Go ahead.
I was going to
Yeah,
ask you, what do you feel is going on right now? Um,
that's a good question. Well, I see people coming into my work in a way that is very triggered, and their nervous systems are just completely uh just been in fight, flight, freeze for a long time to the point where they've completely lost sight of who they are. So I'm seeing a lot of that. I mean, it's a theme I think I'm just noticing in a pattern in my work that I'm seeing is the consistency of not knowing who they are. Like people come in and they're living these lives and they really don't know who they are at all. And their relationships
mhm.
are collapsing. Their relationship with the work that they do is very like confused. There's a lot of confusion, I think. And I think
Mhm.
that, so I could go on and on, but that's in general. There's just like a loss of self and loss of place in the world. Like, what's going on? How do I do this? Just feeling ineffective in their lives too, like not feeling like they even know
Mhm.
what to do. Like, what is this? So when we look out what's on the news, what I mean, and I've heard a lot of this in the astrology too, that other astrologers are say, I think I've heard, like right now, October, the shit's really going to hit the fan, you know, that kind of stuff. And so, and I think people are like, they're experiencing that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the danger with astrology too, because,
Mhm.
you know, I prep for this kind of just making a list, reminding myself, okay, like what's coming up over the next months? What are the, you know, with the astrology, there's all these different planets in orbit making different shapes and in certain alignments, you know, it might show up in a more tangible way where you can be like, ah, that shape really mirrors this event.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and because everything moves at different paces, you know, it helps. I'm pretty visual. Okay, this is background, this is middle ground, this is foreground in terms of
Mhm.
what's going on now. And you could
Mhm.
really refine it to, you know, a few hours of really, I mean, if you track the moon against your personal chart,
Mhm.
you can pretty, I mean, there will be a crisis point for a few
Mhm.
hours every month. You know, that's consistent. If you're on your SHIT with your breathing exercises and just detaching from what you can't control,
Mhm.
that might not be such a big speed bump for you. But for
Mhm.
other people, their definition of if their nervous system is shot, like the example, if everyone's in stress mode, then that
Mhm.
little thing
Mhm.
can be a real accident. Um, so again, with astrology, you can track it, you know, really, really by the hour.
Specifically, yeah.
Or you can look at these larger cycles, like you used the word collapse, you know,
Mhm.
and the feeling like nothing. You know, that to me is Pluto energy. It's a
Mm.
250-year cycle.
Mhm.
It's what's interesting to me is it's not visible with the human eye.
Mhm.
So it deals with very deep, sweeping, transformative changes, but that you can't easily identify.
Mhm.
Whereas with Saturn may bring a change, you know, let's say a move, the birth of a child, a marriage, a major contract. That's something you
Mhm.
can see. Public
Mhm.
that planet's visible. But
Mhm.
with Pluto, it can really trigger the deepest fears because there is an inherent uncertainty about it, but there's this immense feeling of its weight. Um, so,
That
you know,
feels very relevant to what I'm seeing with people for sure.
yeah.
That
So we can,
heaviness.
mm-hmm. And you know, let's say 250 years is ballpark. It has an elliptical orbit, so it's going to spend a different amount of time in different pieces of sky territory.
Mhm.
Um, but let's say, you know, since about 2008 is when it entered Capricorn, and
Mhm.
it's preparing to leave and enter the next sign.
Mhm.
Um, Again, Pluto, I consider it a planet. Maybe some people don't. Um, but I think it's useful for really if you're talking about big major changes in the collective or personally,
Mhm.
that is Pluto. It's a complete uh, destruction, gutting, and rebuilding of something. And
Yeah.
the
There's a lot of that I see. Yeah, yeah. Is Pluto in
mhm,
retrograde right now?
it just stationed direct.
Oh, okay.
So and that happened back to back with a pretty intense full moon. So that was, I don't have the date written down. It was fairly recently, but that weekend, there's not one
Yeah.
person who wasn't
I
like
think it was like last
WTF. Like,
weekend. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
crazy.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
so many people, I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep. I haven't slept in days.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was pretty intense. Um, so those station days
Mhm.
when, you know, every planet, the sun and moon are not planets, they're luminaries, is going to go retrograde for a certain period of time. Um, Pluto, let's say it's 5 to 6 months
Mhm.
every year. So it's
Mhm.
nothing new.
Right.
Um, and because again, it's larger, deeper,
Mhm.
sweeping changes, systemic changes happening. Um, it's hard to focus on it all the time, but the
Mhm.
station days when
Mhm.
it starts moving retrograde or starts
Mhm.
moving forward, those are days where you can usually feel like something's different today.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm a geeky teacher type, so I'm very lesson oriented. That's my only way to like cope with, with these forces. It's like, okay, what's the lesson here?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No,
so
I
you can
think that's
kind of
useful.
you got to do something with it,
Right,
or
right.
numb yourself to it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so
absolutely.
usually, yeah, if you do track this stuff,
Mhm,
the retrograde period, for example,
mhm,
there will be a beginning and end time for one major lesson or one aspect of your life going through that kind of gutting and rebuilding.
mhm.
Um, I think we're noticing it more because Pluto is really coming to the end of his sign. And there tends to be a kind of squeeze deadline feel when that happens. So Pluto in
Mm,
Capricorn
mhm,
most recently started, like, let's say 2008, it
mhm.
enters with the recession. There's other
Oh,
stuff going on too.
oh, interesting.
Cap Capricorn deals with, in medical astrology, the bones. So the physical structures, core structures. It can be ancestry, genetic patterns. So all, people suddenly getting into ancestor stuff or
Uh-huh,
connecting to that energy or
uh-huh.
wanting to be the curse breaker. My generation is breaking the curses.
I'm
That's
seeing
that's
that. Definitely see there's
mhm.
more of an awareness of that than I've ever seen. I mean,
Yeah,
in our work, it's probably pretty understandable, but yeah, people are coming to the session like saying, I have ancestral stuff that I want to clear. Whereas before that
yeah,
never
and
was the case.
yeah, and I think, well, I mean, it's different for everyone, the level it impedes on
Yeah,
free will
yeah.
choices. But I personally have found myself, making certain decisions and then stopping and being like, is that actually what I want to do? Or is that what, like, my grandparents would want me to do? And I feel
Mm,
like this is my obligation, you
yeah,
know?
such a good
Um,
question.
and from a healing perspective, I think it's about removing the obligation rather than napalming everything. Because I think there can be a tendency too, where it's like, this is a block, let's clear it. It's
Right.
like,
I
well,
have to
maybe,
reject everything, right? Like reject
yeah,
everything that, yeah, that's not, I don't think that's healing at all. That's just another block.
I think it brings chaos because then what do you put in its place? You haven't had time to reflect on that. So what you can do is just
Yeah.
create more space,
Yeah.
ease away from the obligation, and then feel into what aspects you might want to keep moving forward and whatnot. But
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway,
Don't
last
burn
time,
your bridges.
yeah. But last time Pluto was in Capricorn before this recent phase,
Mhm.
um, was like the late 1700s. And so it's kind of interesting to see, I guess, American Revolution, let's say around that time, it's going to spend, 15, it's spent like 15 years in Capricorn. I think it's going to spend like 20 in Aquarius, which is the next sign. Um,
Wow.
but
Wow. Wow.
it's that to me is a relevant piece of information because, when you look to making decisions, you want to respect your elders or take advice from, parents or say grandparent, they might not know because
Yeah.
the types of changes and questions that are coming up are much, much older. Um, and so it's very destabilizing. It can make
Mm.
people feel like they don't know what to do. Throwing the word unprecedented around for
Mm.
COVID is not, I don't know if it's unprecedented. I mean, I don't want to be too contentious, but I think there are other periods of history where people
Oh,
were put
yeah.
in a
That's
similar box. Um,
unprecedented for the people who are alive now. But you know what just popped into my head? This idea of, in our work, asking our ancestors who were at this time to come forward and just sort of speak to us about what it is that their insight about it, like what they were experiencing, what are
Mhm.
the patterns that we're carrying, that like there's what are the healing opportunities in essence, like what can we learn, what's the insight, what's the
Yeah.
healing. um that's really interesting to think about it in terms of they that our current life elders may not know, because to them this is unprecedented. They have not had this kind of.
Or
Yeah, go ahead. Jump
yeah,
in.
yeah. It's I guess it's their life experience. Like they might not be able to rely on their life experience and what worked for them.
Yeah.
Or the
Yeah.
people before that, were really having to
not that they don't have anything to contribute either, but just well, and I think it's just so fascinating how quickly things have shifted just recently. Like, my kids have grown up, I have teenagers in such comfort. And then there's this prospect of like, wow, comfort could actually, like, the idea of comfort could be completely obliterated. The idea of like world war being tossed around, or nuclear a catastrophe being tossed around. And like, my kids are just like there's an existential fear that they never knew to have before.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't know that it's a bad thing. I don't judge it. It's just I'm noticing it, but I mean, my heart goes out to them, but there's a part of me as a mom that's like, well, you guys have been living a pretty cush life. Like, your point of view is sort of whoa, it's like life is just so, like, it's so soft, like everything is so soft. And it's like, you know life isn't always soft. And like, how do we, like, the whole resilience piece, you know
Mm.
like, how do you cultivate resilience in a generation, or a community of people who haven't had a whole lot of, um I would say, physical challenges. There's certainly, COVID is a huge, like, psychological challenge for them on so many levels.
Yeah, I mean, and I think America, maybe France as well, at this time are going through, I mean, I'm isolating them, a particularly intense version of this cycle with Pluto, because we're dealing with, like, circling back with the US to, like, the ratification of the Constitution. So it's really, we take that symbolically. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't mean to say that that was the beginning of the US, because there are people here before that. But if
Mm-hmm.
we take that as a beginning initiatory point,
Mm-hmm.
that point is under scrutiny right now.
Mm-hmm.
Every little thing. Does that
Mm-hmm.
still work? Can we take this forward? Because Pluto can act like kind of a garbage man.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we're dealing with a kind of reminds me
Well,
of like a city like built on top of garbage. It's like, well, it's finally starting to, we have to do something about this now. It's like
yeah. Well, it's interesting
working.
you say that. There was an event that I went to, and someone was saying, business is super, like a crazy business that's going off the charts right now, is anyone who will deal with junk. Like, people are
Mm,
clearing their houses and getting rid of junk. And like, I mean, I do feel, and I'm curious what you think and feel. I feel like we're coming out of a very highly materialistic phase. I mean, I think we have to, because the economy is, crashing. But, just with the price of inflation, I think I can just sort of feel a shift away from like there's just been so much bling, and like, like everything luxe is just so important and fabulous, and should be aspired to. But I've even noticed in myself, like I'm happy we have this, like, this house is not too big, it's not palatial, and it's like, like, having the things that we have that are like just solid and reliable seems much more interesting to me than maybe a year ago, where I was like, yeah, I really want this fancy thing, or I want that fancy thing.
mm.
And now, like, I guess the idea of fanciness is so much less interesting to me. And I think it's happening for other people too.
Yeah, I mean, there's some astrology that might back it up. Well, a couple different placements. One, the getting rid of stuff or
Mm-hmm.
emptying out the storage units.
The garbage.
Literally, yeah, some energetically. Um, that lines up to me with the current eclipse axis, where it deals with material and emotional security, I would say, and how we manifest that, but also just a general question of values and what we value. And there
Mm-hmm.
has been a heavy material focus And now we're moving into this sort of air, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
um, Ideas, this intangible, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm a bit of a Luddite, so I'm not a fan of the metaverse. I hate social media. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I do it because I have to, but I really fear for the lack of presence. But
Mm.
again, we like technology. If there probably will be very, very advanced scientific advancements coming up, whether that's space or a parallel reality we experience through a headset or whatever
Right,
the
right.
heck people are moving into.
Well, and
Um,
it's interesting too, and I try to say this dispassionately, like if we if we destroy our planet, then we are going back to the Stone Age. I mean, there will be some people that survive. Some, if there's like this nuclear holocaust or whatever. I don't know that everyone would die. Maybe they would, but I think that would be a beginning. That would
kind of
be
hope, kind of hoping that the people who are so disconnected from the planet
Mhm,
or nature, put it that
mhm,
way,
mhm.
are the ones that are inspired to go colonize some other planet. And
They very much, yeah. I mean, there are people, I've heard people talking about how like this planet is done and we need to just move on. And I'm like, you go ahead and leave.
I mean, yeah,
We're
if that's how
good.
they feel, yeah,
Yeah. Like
good riddance.
this is this is a very great planet. I would really not like us to destroy it. And, but I also feel a bit of and not that I don't feel a personal responsibility at all. I mean, I think the reason I do my work is because I feel a complete and total sense of responsibility. And like, this is what I try to do in my work in my own way. But I mean, as you and I know, in our work, we explore non-physical. We connect with people on a soul level. And it's almost like when you do that enough, there's also a part of me anyway that's like, we could do we whatever happens, it's going to be okay. Right? Like we're all going to be okay in the end.
Yes, I mean, but yes. However, I mean, I'm a stubborn person. I'll say it.
Do it. Yeah, say it. Bring it. I love it.
And I feel like I've definitely, as a healer, like attracted lessons through pain and hardship.
Mm-hmm.
Though I do my best to hide that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that people need to learn that way.
Yeah.
Um, but I have total compassion for those more disconnected. I mean, you can always get more connected to the land, but frankly, it wasn't until I was living on a farm where I really like had to face certain realities that I didn't want to look at before.
Yeah.
And it was a
Like
really
what?
remarkable well, I mean, I entered into that situation as a raw vegan, wanting to be a breatharian and live on prayer and drink water through my skin and love and light, like make,
Wow. Wow.
yeah, there are people doing that, but it's like, if you're an ambitious person, it's like, well, that must be the pinnacle of
Mm.
attainment
Hmm.
is to not need the physical realm and not be wasteful and whatever.
Hmm.
But then I came to a place where they had animals on this farm
Hmm.
um, that needed to be slaughtered, not in it wasn't very industrial.
Hmm.
Um, but I also saw that they were using the animals to rehabilitate the soil that had been so abused by the tractors and more industrialized farming.
Hmm.
And so this ideal of like, well, I can just short circuit it to, prayer and whatever and ignore the realities and histories of,
Yeah, the
what we've
spiritual bypass.
done to the planet. Yeah, there must be a magic pill. If I just pray enough, that's
Hmm.
enough. And I'm not,
Hmm.
prayer is incredibly powerful and you can feel it and it's a wonderful practice. But so is getting a shovel in your hands and working. But it's
Hmm.
it's very hard. I mean, I personally still struggle with knowing um, how much, to get involved. Because if you come from like kind of a cushy environment, it's a shock to the system. And I
Mhm.
think if anyone on a healing path, if you try to jump into something that's so far removed from what you're used to, you're gonna snap back. And this goes for anything, whether you're dealing with um, addictions, new habits, whatever. It's
Mm.
like maybe, um, I don't know, a more organic transition, a
Yeah,
more, again, more organic awakening or reconnection to
yeah,
one's environment, being more accountable for what one consumes and where it comes from,
yeah,
and just
yeah,
knowing. And the problems with, I mean, ideals are great, and doing things for purely ethical reasons or whatever mental reasons. It's a great starting point, but really getting into like on all levels the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual implications of your choices and actions personally over the long term and for the collective,
hmm,
what happens. And that's kind of an ugly place to look at, I think, especially when it comes to the collective
mm.
implications. It comes to
Ye-
shared resources.
Oh,
um,
you mean the place that where people get really idealistic and it's and how that impacts the collective? Is that what you mean?
Well, all of it too. I mean, we've
Hmm.
all got to take actions, and
We all
we have
do
the
in our daily life. Yeah.
and I think especially since COVID, the isolation and the armchair activism, people are really um, into their
They're
ideas.
fired up, fired up.
Yeah, and
Well, there's
myself
something.
included. I mean,
Well, I think it's really interesting though. I mean, like there's maybe it's because of my age. I'm 50. And like I was very idealistic when I was in my, teens, 20, 50, 15 to like, in my 20s, I was just like, I had a very strong sense of what the ideal situation was. But I think having access to past lives in a way has really like tempered me because I
mm,
have recollection of my own very, very fucked up past lives where I was just like terrible. And I think what that enabled me to have access to is compassion for people who are exploring what that is, and just sort of like
mm,
I I really like I try to be in a place of just trusting. And I don't think everybody should feel this way, but I've come to a place in my life where it's like I'm trusting that the course is like my soul knows what I'm here doing, right? Like there's a course that I'm on, and I agree every day that this is the course that I'm on, right? And so all the other stuff that's going on, if it comes into my field of focus that I'm like I have a strong inclination towards. I'm like, yes, I need to. And so that's a yes. That's like an internal yes. And if it's no, it's like, okay. And sometimes there's judgment, like, shouldn't I? But then it's like, I'm just going to trust that my soul will let me know when it's like, okay, notice that. Okay, notice that.
mhm.
Right. And so I feel like if enough people felt that way, there would be something different being expressed. But at the same time, like honoring people are needing to go through this fucked up time for some reason. Like,
Oh, totally, totally, totally.
yeah.
And but
No,
I
and I'm
do
not saying you're
think,
not. And I'm in agreement with you. And I'm also like, it's an interesting thing to contemplate because I don't think very many places you can actually have a conversation with people about it and not have people like explode or get like you're this, you're that,
yeah,
like try to box you in. And like let's not box each other in. Let's just be wherever we're at. And I want to hear what you have to say.
yeah. I think also I feel like I had mentors or just significant people in my life from other countries who had been through, that country had been through um, this kind of, I guess, change cycle. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a wisdom, maybe a jadedness as well,
What
from,
country are you talking about?
well, I'm thinking like Soviet Union,
Mm-hmm.
uh, politics, I suppose. And
Mhm.
my favorite book was always The Master and Margarita, which I think is,
I've never read it. Tell me about it.
yeah, read it. You gotta read it. I'm sure everyone's tried to make a movie of it. It's you gotta read it.
Why is it okay? I'll read it. I'm writing it down right now. What
I just think
say
it's a
more?
brilliant, I think it's a brilliant kind of parallel for the collective questions that are coming up for people right now. When I meditate on, I guess, my own discomfort and when I see or when I look ahead,
Mhm.
next 2 years, what might happen.
Mhm.
Um, there's, it kind of maxed out on the development of the individual, um, proving independence.
Mhm.
Um, but what do healthy collective decisions look like? I want to use the D word, democracy. And I, it, from what I observe, um, it seems like people don't really know if they're not from a sort of tribal background. Um, they don't have that experience of needing to make group choices. Sometimes
Yeah.
I would say even not to be like dramatic, but life or death choices, because frankly, like you say, even people having blown out nervous systems,
Mhm.
I think that's definitely true.
Mhm.
Personally,
Mhm.
had to leave a city. I was really excited to be
Yeah.
living in a new city.
Yeah.
I noticed as soon as I came left to a more rural area, my body
Mhm.
was spontaneously going through like a heavy metal detox just from everything I think I absorbed there. Um,
Wow.
my intuition was totally jacked up and I think it was from having the nervous system fried all the time, whether it's
Uh-huh.
all the electricity, not clean air, water, um, just the collective. I mean, I may be more sensitive than most people,
Yeah. Yeah.
but or
Which
at
is a
least
good thing.
it is. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it is what it is. But I was surprised because it wasn't until leaving that I realized like just how, I noticed I was sleeping with my mouth open, like total shallow breathing, like heart rate
Mm.
was terrible, even though I do yoga and breathing exercises. Like in order to stay in that environment and maintain, um, clarity,
Mhm.
it would be a full-time job. Um,
Wow.
just because there's just bombardment from all angles. And I think of my nephews, they're quite young, these children, I think they're born into so much stimulation. Like
Mhm.
I don't know what it's gonna be like for that generation, you know.
Well, I see it in my kids, but I think it's interesting too. And not everybody has the same experience with their sensitivity. I do notice that like I have a friend um that is a highly sensitive person with like food and like like how do I say like substances um like when they spray chemtrails in the and she's like it's so bad now that I can't even go outside of my house when they're spraying. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I mean, I can feel it, but I'm like, you know, I sort of lean on, and maybe I don't know if this is, maybe it'll end up being my demise, but I think I sort of am in a space right now where I'm leaning into just being like, just go all the way and be human, Nora. Like, just go all in. And what that means to me right now is just sort of like, that's happening. And I agree that I don't like that. And if I like I set the intention, if I could not have chemtrails, that's what I would want. Like I just make little like declarations about what my preferences are and just go about my day. You know what I mean? And really do my best not to get like all in it because it tanks me. Like my
Stress,
capacity,
yes.
my
Stress is not good.
capacity just is, I can't function. I can't be a good mom. I can't be a good partner to my
Mhm.
husband. I like it my sensitivity to I think my sensitivity is more in how I think about stuff. Like if I'm thinking in a way that has a negative slant on something and then I'm like ruminating about it, oh my gosh.
No,
Like,
and I don't think that's the answer. And I do,
oh, and I'm
you
not
know,
saying you are. I'm not saying you are at all. I'm just saying in general, like, it's so interesting how we all have our own sensitivities, and it's just fascinating to me. So you're in a rural place, and I'm curious too, like in your astrology, what did your astrology say about Austin?
okay. So there there is an astrological technique. I mean, astrocartography is the study of one's relationship to place.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, you could look at the lines or the influences going through a particular area for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's kind of hard to talk about without seeing the map.
Mm-hmm.
It
No,
was
that makes sense. I mean, I think it because you've talked about it before with me, and I think it is totally fascinating. And yeah, I think that makes sense what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, my reasons for going there, I don't want to say were kind of outside of my control, but I was responding to, I had family there. I felt a sense of duty needing to go and trying to align best with
Mm.
that.
Uh-huh.
Um, there was stuff I needed to do there.
Yeah.
And as someone who's kind of been in gypsy mode for like 20 years, really, since I left California and went overseas. And then I guess I finished school over there and just was moving constantly since.
Where
There's
were you
always,
and where were you overseas?
so I went to boarding school in Cambridge, England, and
Oh,
then
okay.
lived in Scotland for like 5 years.
Oh, I don't
Um,
think I knew that piece.
oh, yeah, my past life. Um, yeah. So yeah, since then I've been moving constantly, and as you get older, the nomad lifestyle kind of wears on you. So there's, always a hope of like, just like maybe this will maybe this will be the place.
Right.
Um, my personal astrology says no, there's a little bit longer of figuring that out.
Uh-huh.
So that using techniques where I'm looking at the actual birth chart and an area that relates to home, like physical home or one sense of home or homeland, um, and changes happening in there. Um, but
But
anyway,
I bet you have so many, I mean, just so much experience, like, going, creating a sense of home to the best of your ability wherever you go, and then it not working out. And then just, I mean, there's something really beautiful about that. And I've been through very nomadic phases of my life. And it just feels very I mean, I get what you're saying 100%. And but you take so much, like I would imagine that you really get all that you can out of that experience, and then on you go to the next. And so what has that been like for you going from Austin to Sedona?
I was just in Austin for a few months, actually during the Pluto retrograde. I was in Austin.
Uh,
Then
so how
once
many
that
months is
ended,
that?
I don't know, like 5 or 6. It was kind of
Oh,
like back and forth, and then I decided to move. Yeah, anyway. Um, that I I mean, I was in Tucson before.
mm-hmm.
I I was crying with gratitude when I was driving back in across the
Oh,
Arizona
oh
border. I
yeah.
just felt so much more at ease in the
Wow.
state. But yeah, the gypsy thing, I
That's
mean, I
really
guess it's
interesting, like the energy of Texas versus Arizona
it's
for you.
personal. I mean,
Oh, of
some people
course.
love it there,
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
and
clearly, clearly. Well, and
and
I had that experience. I mean, I didn't live in Austin though. But I think that's a great sensitivity to have, right? Like some people will just live wherever. I have a twin brother that lives in the Woodlands,
oh wow.
and that's where we were living. And me
Huh.
and my husband, when we were there for 2 years, and we wanted to be close to family. We're like, oh yeah, like because we had been in Hawaii, and then we're coming. We have a house in North Carolina, and we're like, well, we could keep renting out our house and try out Texas. And we were like, we gave it the good college try, right? We were just like totally in. And then we were like, it hit us both, and we were just like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like sitting out in like the grass, like it would cut my feet because it's like a succulent, it's so thick. And I remember we were just like hanging out in the backyard, and like a sea of air conditioners like kicks on, like we're in our little fenced in backyard, and there's one little scraggly ass tree just like that used to be in a forest, right? But it's just one tree. Um
I mean, Austin was beautiful. There was, I mean, the river was beautiful. The
oh yeah,
trails. I
yeah.
got to run there. But
You got
I
to
guess
experience that life for a
I
try it on.
I did, but I guess I'll say since Pluto has been through my fourth house, so that's a
Mm-hmm.
complete gutting and upheaval
Mm-hmm.
in anything relating to home
Wow.
since 2008. But it's also an intensity. It's
Mm-hmm.
like an electromagnetic kind of pull,
Mm-hmm.
can be Pluto as well. I've felt that with every move. It's been like this intense feeling you need to go here.
Mm-hmm.
And I've sort of decided I'm not moving again until I get that impulse where it's
Mm-hmm.
really the most important thing for me to physically be in this space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think when you set that intention or align yourself with that,
Mm-hmm.
you will go there. And I wasn't, I'm not the type of person that will go and do all the touristy things and really get to know every aspect of the town. I'm kind of like, feel like I have kind of like a grumpy soul where it's like, oh God, okay, I'll do what I have to do. I'll make sure to squeeze in some enjoyment and fun, but I want to make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to do in this space. I feel complete about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, so I've had very activating experiences with specific places in the world where either it will just like in the, you can do it through a past life where you reawaken abilities or you connect to something at another
Mm-hmm.
point in time. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
personally see them as more as parallel lives rather than past, just because
Mm-hmm.
of the nature of how they seem to weave in and out energetically through this
Mm-hmm.
timeline.
Sure, sure.
Sorry, this super woo-woo explain.
No, well,
But
it's very multidimensional. And one of the thoughts that comes to mind when you're talking about your moves is being this catalyst, is being this sort of energetic catalyst for activation, you know? And I mean, you probably could make that's probably like scientifically verifiable that certain people, like when they, and especially with all of your moves, like the people that you've worked with in your work and just even lived around, there's probably, I mean, not that anyone's charting that, maybe you are, I don't know, but I do get the sense that people do, like that happens. I feel like I'm moved too. Like I've definitely had that feeling of like, it's like a cycle is done. I don't know how to read astrology, but I can just tell when it's like I gotta go. Like it's
mhm,
done. When we were in Hawaii, my husband was like, we were like, I think we might be done. Like this isn't gaining any traction. Like we just, when you live in Hawaii, it's like it's either going to take or it's not, and 2 years, and he calls me, he's like, I just got laid off. And my husband's the kind of person like no one would ever lay him off for, like he's such a hard worker, good guy, happy, sweet dude. It wasn't because of him, it was because some shady mofo had been screwing with the money of the organization that he was working for, and then there was no money, and they're like,
uh,
no money, you don't have a job, pack your things, I'm really sorry, and I'm like, oh, well,
oh
I guess
yeah,
that means we're heading out. I mean, like there it is. And I
yeah,
think
yeah.
we get those signals that are like, pow, there you go.
Oh, 100%. And I didn't really track my own moves astrologically, and until I was in full swing of the moving process. So I was able to look back historically and analyze it based on that. I'm still kind of cautious with my own I mean, my relationship to divination astrology is I don't ask everything. Like sometimes I'm curious about something, but it
Mhm.
feels, it's not like for reverential reasons, but more, I don't feel I'm objective enough to
Mm.
really clearly read this properly. I might
Mhm.
glance at it, but
Mhm.
it's not really going to do me any good to look at certain things in real time. But I do use it if I'm considering a move, to look at, say, retrogrades, for example,
Mhm.
and be like, this might happen in phases. It
Mhm.
might not be all or nothing. So just
Mhm.
pace yourself when you're thinking about, moving trucks and whatnot.
Right, and like
you know,
flat tires and crap.
just it's more for pacing and just
Uh-huh.
sense,
Yeah.
because sometimes with these impulses, like, okay, this is done. Um, you'll get it if you're having, a certain kind of moon transit in that moment. I can be impulsive, and I've learned to kind of doing my best to slow down a little more with the bigger decisions, not needing to do everything at once,
Hmm.
um, because that can be kind of draining. Oh, you can do things and ride on the adrenaline,
Oh my
but
gosh,
it's
yeah, I
taxing.
totally know that feeling. Yeah. Well, yeah, and it feels like it can feel like very out of control.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So fascinating. I wonder, like, that I think that's also part of the mystery that I delight in. Like, to me, feeling into like moves and like just even imagine other people like being moved to go like check out other places. That to me is like a joyful place in my heart. Like, it doesn't feel moving has always been really easy for me too. Um, and and it's interesting because not everybody has that relationship with moving, right? Like some people
Mhm.
are like they won't move ever and the thought of it would be horrific and not good. But like I sort of look at how the world is unfolding kind of like that. Like I'll know when I get kicked out, like that, okay, I guess I'm getting kicked out, like I get getting the boot out of off the island or off this, whatever, like wherever, or like it's the universe is letting it lets us know if we just sort of go there, let ourselves go there and be in trust, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, trust is really important. I feel lucky too that I've had the opportunity to immerse myself in so many different places, cultures. Because the difference with traveling is you go, but if you tell yourself you're moving to a place, you kind of more firmly commit to the energy and whatever's going on in that space.
Yeah, and you have to
And
engage with that,
yeah,
like the
you
people of that space. You have to have services provided and work, you have to communicate with actual the environment, people, culture.
yeah, I mean, one funny thing about Texas is I kind of felt like I couldn't say I was an astrologer because there seemed to be just this overriding fear towards it. Like it was,
Really?
even in Austin, a
Really?
lot
That
of people
surprises me.
waking it was very subtle. Nobody said it to my face,
Huh.
but there seems there's quite a bit of a stigma around it, maybe being devil worship or whatever. I mean, divination,
Interesting. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
historically it's not been allowed for most of history, or
Right.
is it be, and I actually agree with that because you can have very vulnerable people. You can tell them something that isn't really entirely true, or they're, you're delivering the information in a persuasive way.
Irresponsible. Yeah, it can be,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, like the responsibility of the practitioner is so the integrity, I guess, would be the
and
integrity is
yeah,
not always there.
the challenge is most, the issue I'm seeing, or the crisis in the new age movement or alternative practices, is just well-intentioned re-traumatization rather than healing occurring,
Yeah, yeah.
or selling a peak experience.
Hmm.
Even something as innocent as breath work, you're giving these people this orgasmic high, but most of them will just think that they're chasing the next best thing, and I'm watching it become like the gateway drug to actual, drugs, and it's boring to me as a practice. I mean,
Yeah,
people can
yeah.
do whatever they want, but it it's it becomes escapism.
Well,
It
and I think
becomes,
it also, I
yeah.
mean, I feel like there was a lot of progress made, and it almost feels like there's like the new age movement, what it was called, or spiritual stuff, woo. There's definitely, it feels like there's more of a leaning towards, I don't know, just like that snake oil salesman energy. Like people are doubting, like I think, and I think that I wonder if that's just part of what it is there's always going to be um I don't know, this discernment component, this integrity component. I don't know. I mean, but I'm seeing it, like people are definitely they're I feel like they're awakening it at rapid speed, but or maybe
Yes,
people are
that
just
is good.
becoming more discerning and that they're having experiences where they're like, no, that's BS. And um
The challenge is you're dealing with the intangible realm. You're dealing
mhm,
with a realm that hasn't dropped down. So I'm not going to say affirmations are BS. Because if
mhm,
you, with a pure heart, are setting an intention and repeating it daily or saying a mantra or whatever, you're really doing your best to align with that change,
right,
what you're trying to call in. The
right.
next step, though, is then you listen, you go through your life and you observe those little moments of change, those little moments of opportunity to take a different physical step towards aligning with that thing. A lot
Mhm.
of people think that just,
The
okay,
spiritual
I am the
bypass.
thing, no, saying it is enough. It's not
No,
bypassing, but it's not completing the
right, right. Like
circle.
it's not the full picture. Right.
It's yeah, it's just it's not letting the energy fully integrate down. This is why I think that physical like doing spiritual thought mental work or
Hmm.
spiritual discussions, all that are
Hmm.
fine. But if you're not including a physical component, a physical discipline,
Hmm.
to maintain some sense of purity or cleanliness in the physical body,
Hmm.
you're just, whatever comes up for you
Hmm.
spiritually or subconscious otherwise is just
Hmm.
going to be the dirt that's floating around your system. The point of
It'll
this,
add other challenges.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, if the subconscious is like the ocean, well, look at what we're doing to the ocean.
Hmm.
We're putting plastic. It's polluted. The
I know
astral
some, what did
plane.
I heard some crazy statistic, and I have no idea if it's true, that we have so much microplastic, like from the water bottles that we drink, and like, all the like the pods of like detergent and stuff, that we consume enough plastic to that it's a complete credit card's worth of plastic each week.
That's crazy. I mean, but I believe it's a part of us. I tried to go shopping at a health food store, not buying anything in plastic, and it was devastating. I mean, I'm
You
like,
can't
whoa.
even do that. You can't because even cans have that plastic liner in them. So
Hmm.
even a can
Yeah, yeah.
is plastic. So and I
It's
think at the huh? What?
it's not, I mean, I think it's part of the lesson. Like,
Yeah.
okay, we're having an intense relationship with plastic right now. At some point in history, it was like pewter, everyone was eating off of the pewter
Lead.
plates. They were getting
Yeah.
poisoned. Yeah, lead in ancient
Yeah.
Rome, whatever. There's always going to be a trendy poison that's going to influence our minds and what we create and how we develop civilization. And then maybe the
Exactly.
next leg is going to
Yeah.
pull away from that. But it is kind of interesting that it's, plastic is kind of am I wrong? It's an endocrine disruptor. It kind of mimics estrogen in the body. So
Hmm.
people, whether they want to or not, are really connecting more to the feminine. And I don't know that
Yeah.
the divine feminine is artificial
Yeah.
hormones, but maybe it is for a lot of people. That is what is required to get in
Yeah.
touch with a
Yeah.
sensitivity to feel into the changes that are happening with the planet. Like I don't
Yeah,
I
I mean,
like
it's
this.
so fascinating. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about like having access to sort of the etheric realms, and then but also having this very human experience that is like within the context of this biology where perceptions are really, like my intellect is only going to be what this body allows me to have, right? Like I can really
Mhm.
aspire, but I'll only have whatever it is. Like I can only run as fast as this body can be challenged. Sure, it can be optimized, but it's just going to be what it is. And so at the end of the day, too, it's like,
Yeah.
is there a way to enjoy this human experience with all of the crazy, wild, effed up stuff going on and have it still be like a glorious life? I wonder.
But then the question is it personal enjoyment or collective enjoyment? Because we can be in our own little bubbles,
Well,
feeling
is
into
my
joy.
job, but is my job to have the collective enjoy?
But it's whether you consider yourself part of something
Well, I
greater.
know, I believe 100% that I am. Like if I'm in joy, then I'm contributing to, this is my belief anyway. If I'm in joy, I'm contributing to that drop in the collective that is of joy, right?
Yeah, I would say so too. That
Yeah, that's worth
it
it to
is
me.
possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that might be what's coming up over the hill for us collectively is one that the belief in that there can be
Mhm.
personal and collective enjoyment
Mhm.
together, because there has been historically a lot of competition in the
Oh,
at
for
least the
sure.
American paradigm and mindset. That's one thing that might need to be overcome if we're actually going to experience that.
100%. I
um
think that's an evolutionary stage that we're going to be facing, like in general, as societal beings, you
I
know?
think so. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's first might have to come through sort of the resource. I mean, people want clean air and water and food, those are the basics that will have to be addressed. And maybe it's through,
Yeah, how
you know,
how is that going to go? That's going to be so interesting. Well, I want to talk more with you, and I have to let another astrologer on.
so we didn't really talk much about astrology.
That's okay. No, but I love this though because it's in your point of view is informed by what you do, and I think more interesting than the very specifics of what the astrology is saying is just how you come to the interpretation that you come to, and I feel like that's valuable and insightful and important for other people to just hear about, you know.
I use it, yeah, for diagnostic with any client, even though I'm technically not legally supposed to diagnose. Like it
Mm-hmm.
informs
Mm-hmm.
a game plan.
Mm-hmm.
There's tracking. That's
Mm-hmm.
whatever goal if someone has, astrology can help with doing that. Um, but
Yeah, why
I
wouldn't
think
you want that? If you
it,
if you resonate with that, I mean, I look at astrology and I'm just like, my mind is
yeah.
my brain is not designed for astrology, but there are gazillions of people who really do, and I just that's why I count on people like you to sort of break it down because I'm like, help me.
It it definitely helps though to like I would say, to make lists. I have been called ahistorical when I was studying history. Like my my teachers were like, "You're hopeless. You're ahistorical. You shouldn't be doing history. Go be an artist." But
Really, that's so
yeah.
interesting. That's so
So
interesting.
so my head was soup. I mean, in terms of my own life and narrative, like I'm like, I don't know. It was like, a few years ago I was doing this, and it may have been 1 year ago, but I thought it was five. Like my
Hmm.
conception of time was so messed up. But doing astrology forced me to go through my Gmails and see, oh, what was happening on this date, what was happening there. And it was really helpful. It was really interesting. And I didn't lose any sense of intuition or feeling. It
Oh
was just like,
no, I mean, I would
yeah,
imagine that it would enhance it.
it gives a language. Astrology is like this beautiful poetry where you can it's like writing a song. I
Yeah,
really do see it as like a symbolic composition that you can do to understand yourself and the world. But
that's beautiful.
that that said, I'm moving more into wellness coaching with my clients, because I didn't talk at all about like the physical issues I've gone on with my whole life. I have not been able to take pharmaceuticals of any kind, like no over the counter,
Oh,
for
wow.
God, since well over a decade, if not longer.
What
And so this,
happens? What happens
my
to you?
body was just rejecting it. And so I had to find alternative remedies for for everything.
You were
And
just forced. See, that's how the
yeah,
universe is like, here you go.
it was, but it gave me a different, I mean, it feeds into really quickly what you were saying about enjoyment is
Mhm.
what I thought enjoyment was actually creating this systemic inflammation in my
Mhm.
body. But it was
Mhm.
normal, you know, I thought it was
Mhm.
normal to have
Mhm.
headaches and all of this
Mhm.
stuff. Um, and then, you know, I once I created a different sense of balance, enjoyment meant like no physical pain and making
Mm.
different choices that wouldn't lead me to need to experience that pain. Or, you know, in the interim stage is kind of eh, like, okay, drinking. You're going to
Mhm.
get a hangover the next day, but if you do
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z, you'll mitigate the, you know, you won't feel it as
Yeah.
intensely, da 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 da. And so you kind of learn detox tricks. Um,
Mm.
but then ultimately you find this alignment where you're just choosing things that are not physically painful.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if this version of myself now went back, you know, 10, 20 years and it's like, you're not going to be doing this, you're not going to be doing this, I wouldn't have seen it as anything joyful. You know, it would have been shocking to me that
Right.
that
Right.
reality is um, even possible. But I do think these kinds of changes, I think it's going to be more common for people to have to find alternatives
Oh, for
because
sure. Yeah.
relying on all this, you know, highly, highly concentrated medicine is supposed to be for emergencies, not everyday usage. And so, you know,
Yeah.
liver and kidney is probably not so happy
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
that. So I think our definition of enjoyment, I guess, might change and be radically different. That's totally solipsistic, you know, based on my own path. But I wonder to what
No, but
extent
you
it
can
will ripple
see it.
out.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I see it everywhere. I mean, when we lived in Texas, I worked part-time at a health health market, like uh supplements and stuff. And I learned so much, and people would come in there so just at the end of their rope, like because Western medicine had been so unhelpful for them, and they were like, is can you help me? And I'm
Yeah,
gonna
that was
have to,
it. No,
sorry,
yeah.
I'm gonna have to shut this down, but I wanna invite you
Okay,
back very soon, and we can continue talking about it, because I think these are all really important points, and people
yeah,
will really love hearing it, and we'll just keep them wanting
awesome.
more. Yeah. So share
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
audience your social media stuff.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
You're the genuine
My,
mystic on
yeah,
Instagram,
on
and I don't, you're not,
Instagram,
yeah, that's it.
not really on Facebook. I mean, that's kind of the main one. I need to sort of redo my site and rebrand. But Instagram is probably the best way to get in touch. You can email at
Yeah, and you do these
the same.
very thorough deep dives into the various astrological things that are happening. I highly recommend you checking Kate out, Genuine Mystic. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being
Yeah,
on the
yeah, yeah.
show. Awesome.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so
Yeah.
much.
See ya.
All right. Bye.